Alright, hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Listography. Today we are going to be talking about one of the biggest groups in the history of hard rock. Of course, I'm talking about Led Zeppelin, just an iconic band. All of their records are so great. They have 9 albums in total for us to look at, so let's get into it. At number 9, I think we can all agree on this one, it is Coda. This is an outtakes and rarities collection that I normally wouldn't even include in a video like this, but it seems that most other people doing Zeppelin lists include it, so I'm going to as well. So this album came out 2 years after John Bonham died. It's an interesting album, and most of the songs on it are pretty good, but having said that, it's also pretty easy to see why these songs were left off of their respective albums. One exception to that might be the song Ozone Baby, which I think is good enough to have warranted inclusion on In Through the Outdoor. And so that concludes the part of the video that we agree on. And this is where I'm going to probably upset a lot of people, and that's fine, I'm okay with that. Let me know what you think down in the comments. But at number 8, I'm going with Led Zeppelin II. This second record on the list, already stepping into some controversial territory with this pick. I watched a few other Led Zeppelin ranking videos, and all of them put Led Zeppelin II in the top 3, so I know I'm really going against the grain with this pick. It could be that I've heard these songs too much and I'm tired of them, but I don't think that's the case, because I've heard all of the other Led Zeppelin albums just as much. This record is not as musically sophisticated as later albums of theirs, and it also doesn't have the same bluesy power of Led Zeppelin I. It also lacks the historical significance that its predecessor holds simply by being the first record. I think Whole Lotta Love is easily their most overrated song. I hate the simple sail away, leave today, way up high in the sky rhyme scheme in the chorus of What Is and What Should Never Be, which for me ruins what would be one of the best songs on the album. And I am all for some good double entendres, but Squeeze My Lemon Till the Juice Runs Down My Leg isn't even clever. It's just kind of gross. In a lot of ways, this album is kind of like the original cock rock record, for lack of a better term. It has a few moments that I like Thank You, probably being my favorite on the album, and the bass playing is incredible throughout. But overall, this album doesn't do a whole lot for me. So continuing with the trend of upsetting people, at number 7, I have Led Zeppelin I. So if everyone isn't already upset at me enough, thought I'd rub some salt in the wound. Now, I will say that I like Led Zeppelin I significantly more than Led Zeppelin II. I'd even go as far as to say it is a great record. It's an extremely important album in the history of rock, and rightfully so. But if I'm going to listen to Led Zeppelin, I'm probably going to reach for something a little later in their career. I just find the music that they made later to be a lot more interesting, both sonically and musically. At number 6, I have the album Presence. Presence is not just underrated, but I feel like it's sometimes completely forgotten. And though it's far from their best album, there are a lot of really awesome songs on this record that people never seem to mention. Achilles' Last Stand is amazing, and reason enough for me to put this ahead of both Zeppelin 1 and 2. But if people do mention a song from this album, it's either that or Nobody's Fault But Mine. But in addition to those, T for One is just an incredible blues number that has some of Jimmy Page's best solo work ever, if you ask me. Huts On For Nowhere and For Your Life are really cool as well. It's a very solid album. At number 5, I have the album In Through the Outdoor. This album was recorded during a period when Jimmy Page was battling heroin addiction and John Bonham's alcoholism was becoming more and more of a problem. Therefore, John Paul Jones ended up taking over a lot of the making of this album. And I'm going to go ahead and say that this album is pretty underrated. I think people are probably a little turned off by all of the synths and keys on this record, but I think that it gives the record its own personality in their catalog, and the songwriting is pretty solid. I maybe would have liked to have Ozone Baby on this album in place of Hot Dog, as I mentioned before. Even though I do like Hot Dog, I think that song probably would have worked better on Coda and vice versa. But yeah, this is a good record. At number 4, I have Houses of the Holy. So if Zeppelin III and Zeppelin IV expanded the band's musical vocabulary, Houses of the Holy takes it even a step further. This is a band hitting a creative peak able to try absolutely anything that they like, and not only does everything work, but it also kind of makes sense. Even the reggae of Dire Maker and the funk of the grunge, it sounds like nobody but Zeppelin. The only reason I have this at number 4 is because somehow they managed to make 3 albums that were even better than it. At number 3, I have Led Zeppelin IV. Even all the way up at number 3, this is probably going to ruffle some feathers. Considered by a lot of people to be their best record, and even by some to be the best record of all time. And granted, it has more than enough iconic tracks to warrant consideration for such things. This record does strike a balance between their raw power and rock and roll energy and their more wild and wandering creativity. And I suppose for most people it just kind of hits a sweet spot between the two. But for me, I don't mind at all when they downplay the rock for more interesting songwriting, which is why I favor the 2 albums that I have ahead of it just a bit more. At number 2, I have Led Zeppelin III. Even with heavy rockers like the Immigrant Song, Celebration Day, Out on the Towels, and the awesome bluesy Since I've Been Loving You, Led Zeppelin III is by far their folkiest album. And folk is something that I wish they had explored a lot more throughout their career, because they do it extremely well. I love Friends, Gallows Pole, Tangerine, That's the Way, and Bron-Your Stomp. Just a really cool, unique album in their discography. And at number 1, I've got Physical Graffiti. For me, this was always a one-horse race. I was always going to have this at number 1. It's similar to Houses of the Holy in that it was wildly creative and explores a lot of different styles and sounds. But to me, it's a groovier record. It's more cohesive, even being stretched out over 2 LPs, and it has better sequencing. In some ways, it's the pinnacle of 70s rock, and by that I don't mean that it's my favorite album of the 70s or the best, but in a lot of ways, it marked the end of a certain era of rock. So yeah, that does it for my listography of Led Zeppelin. If you like the video, hit like, subscribe, and most importantly, comment below. Tell me how crazy my list is, and tell me what else you'd like to see on the channel in the future. Thanks, guys.